Hey geeks, welcome to the 19th episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm really glad you're back, or maybe this is your first time. Welcome. I have an awesome show lined up today. I have somebody I've known for a long time, I think in the late 90s, Rockford Lhotka. I'm going to talk to him, and I've been really excited about this because for a couple of reasons. One is I haven't really talked to Rocky in a while because, we haven't been having MVP summits, and, he's a busy, guy who helps run a company now, so, but, I've been excited not only because I've known him, but I still have a memorable moment of, I think the first time us two talked together. It was at one of the speaker tours at the old VBITS conference, and I still picture pulling into a restaurant near San Francisco. I think it was a seafood restaurant, and I think Rocky and I sat next to each other during that, and that's when I got to know Rocky. And I've really liked him being in this world and knowing him all these years now, and so. I'm really excited to speak with him today. And also, he's one of the few developers who have long hair like me. And so, back when I started software development, a lot of developers had long hair, but now that's been replaced by the short hair people. And there's only a few of us people who refuse to cut their hair left, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, welcome. And I want to get the show going so we can talk to Rocky and leave as much time as we can for Rocky. So I've been promoting the last month or so. I've released my brand new open source projects and NuGet packages, rebranded as Sparging. You can go to sparging.net to go check it out. And these are all the open source stuff, basically I've been working on since basically .NET 2. And now, these, Sparging is .NET 5 and above from now on. It doesn't support core or the framework really that much. So I hope all of you are moving to .NET 5, and you should be, just for the performance gains. And if you do, I hope you'll check out Sparging to make your coding life, a little bit easier. And it's open source, so let me know how you like it, and do a pull request if you want to add something to it also. I want to promote this week the Hello World Cookbook. I've been trying to, do a new book, and my first cooking book, cooking, not code cooking, food cooking book. And so it's called the Hello World Cookbook. And I actually started this project after my last trip to India. If you've been following me for a long time, after I got back from India in 2019, I dedicated 100% of the profit from one of my books to go to them every month. But I decided that wasn't enough. So I'm doing this new cookbook where geeks like us can share, the geeks that can cook, we can share recipes with each other and the world. And so I really, really hope that you'll submit your custom food recipe to the book. I don't think I've gotten one since December. So come on, I need some more recipes so I can get this book out this year. 100% of the proceeds will go to the Voice of Slum NGO in India. That's the NGO that I visited when I was there last time. And the kids right now really, really need your support, especially during the pandemic. They've been doing a great job at supporting the orphans and the kids in the slums in India. So they need your support. And I'm going to play the short video of Mahesh and Magnus talking briefly after our visit there in 2019.
So today we visited Voice of Slum here in India, and it's actually very incredible the work that they're doing here with the children, to teach them and to basically feed them and make sure that they are healthy enough, and then give them an education to get out of this slum. It's a really worthy cause, and I urge anyone to donate and help.
I agree, and not only donate, but I am truly inspired by the people who run this.
Yeah.
You inspire me.
I think Chandni and Dave, you guys have done an amazing job, and it just, you said, it's a very emotional to hear these stories and how much work you guys have done. I wish you guys success, and we will try to help you as much as we can. We're going to take your message and give it to the community.
Yes.
Thank you.
So please go to helloworldcookbook.com and submit your recipes. I know a lot of people on the show are from India. I love Indian food. I cooked my chicken curry recipe last night. I'm eating it right now, not now, but tonight. And it's actually my favorite recipe I came up with for the book. And so anyway, go there. All right. The giveaway this week, as every week, is everybody gets a free real copy of Code Rush from DevExpress. Just go to devexpress.com/dotNetDave and download your copy. And if you haven't heard of Code Rush before, Code Rush is a code refactoring tool. It's my favorite code refactoring tool. It's the only one I've really used in Visual Studio since it came out. And every day that I use it, it helps me to not only be a more productive developer, but also learn. You know, when you keep fixing mistakes over and over again, hopefully you start learning the correct pattern of doing things, and it just kind of naturally weeds out of your mind like it does in my mind. So it's hard for me to write bad code nowadays, just because I've learned so many things from these tools over the years. So please pick up a copy. The refactoring in Visual Studio is refactoring, but it's nothing compared to something like Code Rush. So go pick up your copy. Why not? It's free, right? All right. So with that, I'm going to bring on Rocky. Rocky is the CTO at Magenic and Cognizant Softvision, and is the creator of the open source CSLA.NET development framework, which I was actually checking out the code today. And, I'm really happy that Rocky makes sure that his code is documented, which most of the open source stuff I review is not. And it frustrates me. Anyway, he's an author of numerous books, regularly speaks at major conferences around the world. Rocky is a member of the Microsoft Regional Director and MVP programs. Welcome, Rocky.
Yeah, hi. It's great to be here.
Hey, it's nice to see you, man. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
It has, yeah. I think several years for sure, since we were at the same conference or event.
Yeah. Well, the only time I get to see most of my friends is at the MVP Summit. And, there wasn't one last year or this year, pretty much. And so I didn't go the year before that. So it's like 3 years in a row now. I haven't been able to, hang out with my MVP friends and that whole week. And that's really my favorite conference of the year is the MVP Summit, and I really do miss it. I miss hanging out with my friends from all over the world, including you.
Well, likewise. And it's true. It's, you get in this circle and there are, a whole lot of my friends. I've got friends local, of course, too, but a lot of my friends are speakers or MVPs and folks that I see, 4, 5, 6 times a year. And I have not seen them now for at least a year, if not 2. I'm involved in the VS Live conference series, and we are actually planning our first live event for this November.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm quite excited. Obviously it's all subject to the global pandemic and health and everything, but I have my fingers crossed. It would be so nice to see everybody.
Where's that one going to be?
That's in Orlando.
Orlando. Yeah, I spoke there in 2015 at the Orlando VS Live. Yeah. And I had fun there. I got a lot of great comments I still use from my sessions there, that, Twitter comments that I use for promotion and stuff like that. So where do you live now?
I live in Minnesota. So we're pretty well into spring at this point.
Yeah.
Our snow is finally gone. It's not quite green yet, but give it a couple weeks.
Yeah, I was watching, on the unfortunate, shooting in Colorado this mass shooting in Colorado this
Mhm.
week, and they're showing the parking lot and stuff where it all happened, and snow there. I'm going, it's snow still? Come on. It's
Well,
almost April.
they had a big snowstorm
I know.
just last weekend, I think it was. So
Yeah, I heard. Yeah. So those of you who don't believe in global warming. So what have you been up to lately? Since we haven't caught up, so what's your big things besides the VS Live? What else are you working on lately?
well, yeah, I kind of have two lives in a sense. One is being the CTO at Magenic. Magenic recently got acquired by Cognizant Softvision, and that's, of course, a very consuming thing. To anybody who's been through a merger of any size understands these things take months, so that's pretty consuming for me. On the other side, I spend all my time doing open source and speaking and writing and that sort of thing. And so, of course, there hasn't been much speaking, and I've been doing some writing, but I've really been mostly focused on Blazor and getting everything. I'm very bullish on Blazor and WebAssembly. And Maui probably too. We'll see. And then also spending a lot of time with Kubernetes and containers, because I have this sense that the future for most of us is building software, whether it be .NET or not, but in my case, .NET, and deploying it onto servers that are running Linux containers and deploying client-side code into some sort of cross-platform, very likely WebAssembly, that runs across Windows, Mac, phones, you name it. And I just, it tickles my funny bone, because here we're looking at a future where we're using all this Microsoft cool technology in .NET and deploying to essentially not Microsoft platforms.
That's got to be a bit challenging, to get it onto other different platforms like that. But with .NET, 5 and 6, I mean, that's a lot easier, right? With the, then finally everything's, combined back together again, and they're really working a lot more on the cross-platform stuff.
Yeah, I think it depends on your particular, your UI more than anything else. So if you're Windows Forms, WPF, to a very large degree, you have been and continue to be focused on Windows.
Right.
But if you're doing web server work, ever since .NET Core really became viable, that's been cross-platform and container-based and everything else. And it is really easy. It's just as easy to build and deploy to a Linux environment as it is to deploy to a Windows environment.
Wow. Yeah.
The WebAssembly stuff, but .NET 5 has improved that story a lot, especially around debugging, and I expect .NET 6 will make it even better.
Yeah, I hope so. I know that's going to take a little bit more time to really catch up to the server version of that. But yeah, it's a lot of great promise. Once that all gets working, 100% or 90%. So before I forget, everybody, make sure you make a comment to ask your questions to Rocky. And so don't forget to do that. And so before we go to questions or, the topics you wanted to talk about, I wanted to have you do like a kind of just a short little overview of what CSLA is for those of, everybody out there hasn't heard of that yet, and why you started and what it does.
CSLA is really came out of my early, maybe third of my career, where I spent most of my time building complex data, forms over data
Mhm.
type applications, but complicated. Things that are not just simple, like, oh, here's a form over one table, but order entry systems, inventory tracking for complicated manufacturing environments, all sorts of things like that. And so a lot of business rules, a lot of complexity, and the need to have some standardized way of tackling those problems across your entire development team.
Mhm.
I early in my career had the joy of working in a company that had no standards, and every developer did their own thing. And I think for job security, they had settled on this idea that if I make my code as different from everybody else's, then nobody can maintain my code. Ergo, I can't be fired. It was a disaster. It was horrible. And so I've long, for most of my career, been a strong advocate for consistency in how you tackle code and coding problems, so that I can pick up your code and you can pick up my code, and you might have to clearly understand the algorithms and stuff, but the structure's the same, the approach is the same. And so that was the origin of CSLA, was to do that, coupled with in the mid 90s the ability, with what ultimately became DCOM,
Right.
the ability to build distributed systems, so that your code could run on a client machine, and on the same DLL could be deployed to a server. And really, I don't know, just tickled my interest. And so CSLA supports this concept called mobile objects, where an object can materialize on an app server, interact with server resources, and then move itself to the client workstation, or these days to a WebAssembly app running in a browser, and now interact with the user. And so, long story short, what CSLA does in a nutshell, more than anything else, is it provides a home for business logic. And that logic might run on the client machine, it might run on your phone, it might run on an app server. But ultimately, it gives you a consistent, repeatable, testable way to create business logic for your app. And then that's at its heart. And then it has a whole bunch of helpers to make it easy to create Windows Forms, WPF, WinUI, Blazor, ASP.NET UIs. And
I was looking at that today. I saw all the different, assemblies you have. Yeah. It's, while you were talking about that, I was thinking about, so when I was looking at your code repository today, I was looking at it and I was going, wow, this code looks like it was written by me, and I'm not talking about the algorithms. I'm just talking about the structure, the documentation, the way you name things, properly, and using coding standards and things like that. And, you were saying that, a lot of, when you went into that job and they didn't have any coding standards, everybody kind of did whatever they wanted. That's basically what happens every job I go to, right? And it's insane, that I've been in this business, for 27 plus years, and it seems like we're still fighting this battle. And I just don't know the proper way to get it through the young developers' heads that, you might not care about this right now, but it's good to learn, because, you're going to use stuff like this your entire career, like I have, right? And it makes you a more productive developer. It's easier to find things, when everything's named pretty much the same. And you were talking about how it's all written by different developers trying to basically, keep their job, right? I worked at a short contract here in San Diego once, and one of the developers in the department was developing something in Access, and he purposely did it in the Polish version so none of us could use it. So none of us could code it. He did it on purpose. He told us this, right? Because he wanted to keep his job, so he did it in the Polish version of Access. I'm going, come on, people, this is not the way you keep your job, by doing good work is the way you keep your job, not by, stonewalling people like that. But I'm really glad that, you and I kind of think the same way, and it's obvious that you think that, documentation and proper way of doing things is important. I just wish more, especially more open source developers, believe that. And, one of the things I think about is I think once they get older, they're going to get it, right? Because the older you get, the harder things come in. So if everything's kind of the same, proper way, then it's easier to understand, right? But even when you're younger, I guess too. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't take long. All you've got to do is write something and then move on to something else, and then 6 months later try and figure out what you wrote that. And if you don't have at least some level of documentation or comments and or history in your repo, it's to like, why did I make that change? I don't know. And then extrapolate. I've been doing CSLA now for over 23 years. Yeah. And so extrapolate that out, and every now and then I've got friends that give me a hard time because they're like, how does that work? I'm like, I don't know. I wrote that 20 years ago. Let's go look at the code history and figure it out. Because
right. Or let's look at the documentation, the XML comments or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's one of the, like I said, that frustrates the hell out of me about open source projects. And, and I replied to somebody this week in a tweet, and I said, and I'm including Microsoft in this comment. Microsoft seems to have, not given up, but is not consistent with their documentation anymore. And if you look at the, even the .NET code, a lot of it is not documented at all, except for the file header, and that's not documentation, right?
Right. But I'll flip this around and suggest too, though, that for most of us writing code and solving complicated problems, that's the fun part. Writing documentation is not.
No.
And so I kind of segregate this out in terms of like code comments that Sandcastle or something can be used to create a document file.
Right.
That I don't see any excuse not to at least provide basic documentation in your code at the method, and property level.
Yeah.
Outside of that, at least in my particular case, what I've chosen to do is, the heavy duty documentation for CSLA is all stuff that I create either through books or videos, and then I sell it. Because I'm otherwise not that motivated, right? It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
and,
it is.
It's weird, right? Because the coding part, I guess sometimes is work, but more often is fun. It's challenging and engaging. My day job does not involve coding because I'm a CTO. It's just I live vicariously through others. But my open source work, that's how I keep my hand in and truly understand what's going on with the technology that we have today. Yeah. And but if you turned around and said, oh, and also spend 3 or 4 months writing a book on this stuff that you're going to give away for free, I'd be like, see, that doesn't sound like fun.
Yeah. And for those of you out there, that maybe not write XML comments, at the top of your classes and properties and methods, I have used for a very long time and swear by it, a program called GoStock, and GoStock from submain.com. And, there's a free version and there's at least 1 or 2 paid versions. I have the primo paid version, of course, because I've done webinars for the company and stuff. And, if you use a program like GoStock and if you use proper coding standards, it basically writes the documentation for you, and by looking at your method and the and the parameter names and things like that, and it comes up with the documentation. And 90% of the time, I don't even have to change it very much. Sometimes I have to go in and make it sound a little bit better, or I might, especially with the the tags to show what exception methods are going to be thrown and what their messages are. I have to go in and add that, but it does 90% of your work, And so to me, GoStock is free. There's no reason not to do it because you have GoStock. Everybody has GoStock, and GoStock has got a great spell checker in it. And not only does it spell check the comments, but it also spell checks your parameter names and your property names and things like that, because we all know we can't spell, right? And so GoStock will help you with that before it gets into production, because, as I've said for a long time, if something misspelled or something like that gets into production, it's really hard to change. And so just use GoStock. It's free. Anyway, and about the code comments, I don't do a ton of code comments either, just because I name my variables so they're really understandable, and things like that. But I do if there's a little bit more complicated reasons why I did what I did, right? And the other thing I do in code comments sometimes is when I had to change a particular block of code because of a bug or something like that. I typically like to put the bug, the number or something in there, so it's easy to refer back to, why this change was made. Because I don't, I hate looking at code. I even do this at work. I hate looking at code and asking people, well, why is it doing this way? And I don't know. Well, that's means you didn't document it.
And that, I think, is an interesting. That can go a couple of ways, right? It depends, I think, on how much you trust your source control and how well people leverage their commits or check-ins.
Yeah.
And because I actually disagree with you. I prefer not to put comments in code unless the code is for some reason really obscure,
right?
Or in fact, there's some code that has off and on been in CSLA where it's like you look at it and you're like, why? That line does nothing. But in fact, it does, because it's working around some bug in .NET at the time.
Yeah.
And so putting that comment in 100%.
Yeah.
But I've come over the years to rely very heavily on the ability to look back in my repo and the history. And I started way back with CVS, and then switched to Subversion, and then switched to Get. And I think the CVS history might even still be in the repo. I'm not 100% sure, but I know the Subversion history, at least the mainline check-ins, all ported or migrated. Well, and I say it that way. In reality, a friend of mine worked really hard to get all of the Subversion history into Git when we moved into GitHub. But it's awesome because you can look back a long way, many years, and say, oh, that's why that's there, and especially the way Git works now, the ability, it's pretty easy to your point to say, oh, why did I change this line of code? That's actually not very difficult to do by using, in particular, like GitHub with its web UI, to just easily dig back through the history and figure it out.
I have to look in that some more, I guess. I've been through so many programs, I've just kind of given up on that. And
no, I get it. I'm not saying either one way. I don't know that one way or the other is right, as long as your shop is consistent, right? Yeah,
if it's easy to find, then that's fine. But I know a lot of these programs, it's hard to find, exactly where something was changed and why sometimes. And so that's why sometimes I just put the number or the bug number or something like right in the code, and it's so easy to find that way. Just look it up and boom, done. Kind of like the error messages in Visual Studio. You click on the little link and it takes you right to the thing that shows you what to do. So the documentation library I was talking about before is it's an extension to Visual Studio. It's called GoStock, GHOSTDOC. You can download it for free at submain.com. So go check it out after the show. And And we do have a question. How do you think about web development trends for 2021 and further, maybe about technologies like .NET? So what do you think the web, I mean, we were talking about Docker, but what do you think, where the web development is headed?
Well, if I look at what we do as a company, Magenic has 850 consultants.
Wow.
And now we're part of a much bigger company. Mm-hmm. But I'll just stick with Magenic because that's what I know. Most of our work on the web front end is Angular. A good chunk is React. Also a good chunk is server-side static, or well, not static websites, but ASP MVC or Razor Pages type work. Mm-hmm. Maybe with a little bit of JavaScript. I mean, it's like a spectrum, right? On one end, you've got I actually wrote a web app like with Angular, all the way down to, for some scenarios, we still just write old-fashioned web pages that are just HTML and CSS.
Yeah.
I think I don't see where, and obviously there's always a churn. There's people that like Vue.js, and there's always other frameworks vying for, to become mainstream in terms of UI development. I personally am heartened by the fact that Angular and React provide two very different programming models that both of them give us the ability to create smart client apps that run on the client device. I've been an advocate for that since, since 1993, probably. But, just the idea, prior to that, I was a terminal programmer. I wrote stuff on mini computers and mainframes that projected to terminals. And using the browser just as a fancy terminal, essentially server-side web dev. It's like, yay, I'm back in 1991.
Exactly, with the green screens, right?
Yeah, only now we've got color. Yay. So I get excited about smart client things like VB used to be, or Windows Forms, or Angular and React. And I've also, for a long time, you got me on a rant here, sorry.
Okay.
but for a long time, and I'll go back actually to roughly 2001, give or take. I was speaking at conferences at that point, and this was the .com boom, right? But what was interesting was that a lot of the speakers at that point, you get in the speaker room and have these conversations, kind of heady conversations, and people were like, "Oh, the terminal should stay dumb, right? It should just be a document display thing, and it should be HTML and all this scripting stuff. That's dangerous." And then there was the other camp that's like, really the browser, if scripting grew up, if the browser became a real runtime, it would solve this whole cross-platform thing, because we wouldn't care about Windows or Mac or anything Linux. None of them are relevant at that point, because you just write for the browser. And then the .com collapse occurred, and that whole conversation kind of got buried. Well, here we are 20 years later, roughly. Yeah, exactly. 20 years later, and the camp that said that the browser should be the runtime has effectively won. Right? Yeah. I mean, most of us write most of our client-side software to run in a browser, and we don't care if it's on Windows or Mac or iPhones. Who cares? It runs in the browser. In my mind, though, the big thing that has always been holding back the real explosion of the browser as a runtime is that it only supports one programming language, and now it does not. Now it supports two. It supports JavaScript and a low-level assembly language called WebAssembly. And so what that means is that it actually now supports C, C++, C#, Rust, Go, everything. And so to me, we're at the dawn of a new, I believe, bright new, exciting period of time for web client development, because now JavaScript has real competition, right? There are UI frameworks being built using Go and using Rust, and Blazor, of course, which is on .NET. But it's not just Blazor on .NET. There's the Uno platform also. And so, I mean, is this not awesome, right? And so far, these new WebAssembly based UI frameworks are not, I don't think they're as quite as robust or as mature clearly as Angular and React.
Yeah.
But they're moving fast. And so
Yeah.
give them another couple of years, they will be at least as robust, maybe more so. And for us as developers, this is awesome because it's all competition. You know, this all this means is it's going to really force the React and Angular framework devs to up their game.
Right.
Right. Because they're, you know, now they've got some other competition. It's going to possibly force the JavaScript language to change or you know, mature in certain ways. The tool chains in particular, I think, are the Achilles heel of web dev. You know, like the actual dev and, you know, npm and you know, that, and the dev experience, especially with Blazor, sits on top of the .NET experience, which is super smooth, right?
Right.
Especially in comparison to the constant churn of the web. Yeah, every web project I've been involved with has a substantial amount of overhead just keeping up with all of the npm churn, right? All the packages that every week there's a package change, and everybody has to conform, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like .NET is stagnant, but it doesn't have that level of chaos. And so I don't know. I'm excited. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I agree with you. And you know, I've, you know, kind of purposely tried to stay away from JavaScript as much as possible because, you know, from a guy who mostly learned structured languages, you know, like we all did back in the beginning in VB and stuff like that, you know, using JavaScript for me was going, what? You know, this doesn't make any sense. It's not compiled. It's really noisy. And so I kind of stayed out of it, and for a lot of reasons. But one is kind of like you were saying, is like every freaking week it seems like there's another new framework coming out for JavaScript, and I'm going, oh man, you know. And especially when I was at, you know, the MVP summit once, and Anders Heidelsberg, if I pronounce his name right, you know, stood up in the meeting in front of us and said, "Is JavaScript is broken? Someone needs to fix it," right? And that's basically when he quit .NET and went to go do TypeScript. You know, was when that happened, because he was so fed up with, you know, all the JavaScript stuff going on. And so, yeah, I think, you know, the things like, you know, Blazor working in the browser, you know, actually compiled language working in the browser, I think is pretty exciting. Yeah. And I hope he gets a better experience out of that.
To give Anders his due, though, TypeScript is a radical improvement on JavaScript.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's no doubt, and and there's a whole lot of people, and at least an entire generation of developers that didn't grow up with structured languages, that didn't grow up with typed languages. They grew up with JavaScript,
right?
And it's, you know, they may or may not ever see the value in strong typing and, you know, having the compiler catch those issues. And and I think it's funny because you mentioned VB, but before the option strict capability was in Visual Basic, Visual Basic was just like JavaScript, right? There were no types. It was all, and we all went through that. Well, those of us in our age group anyway, all went through that transition where we're like, oh, turning options strict on reveals massive numbers of bugs in my code that I didn't even know were there. And you know, but on the other hand, it also made a whole lot of things harder because we were used to just assigning variables to random things regardless of
whatever.
So it's a big adjustment.
It is. But, you know, there's, to me, you know, the benefits outweigh the, you know, the negativity of not, you know, of type languages. Type languages, to me, the benefits are better, you know, if you can work through, you know, the other things like you were saying. Stephen, who's the producer for this show, asked, creating API with Django and then consuming it in Blazor server app. Thoughts?
I don't actually know very much about Django, so
Yeah, I mean,
there's no way for me to answer specifically. Here's what I would say is that if you can consume the API from JavaScript, you can consume it from Blazor.
Yeah.
Because ultimately Blazor, or to put it a different way, if you can consume that API from, let's say, WPF or ASP.NET, you can also consume it from Blazor.
Right.
Blazor at your level, a coding C# level, Blazor is using HTTP client, and so in that regard, it's just like .NET code.
Right.
Under the covers, it's actually delegating to the browser to do the call because it's running in the browser sandbox, and so there are some limitations compared to a raw HTTP client call from WPF.
Right.
But they're exactly the same limitations that Angular and React developers face every day, right? Because the limitations come from the browser sandbox and cross-origin script, all that sort of thing applies to Blazor because it is, in fact, running in the browser.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't have any more questions. Please don't forget to submit your questions. We're getting short on time. So let's see. How to use C# for mobile application?
Yeah, I'll take that as a question. There are two ways, I think, right now that I look at that. Let's say three. I'll say there are three ways to look at that right now. One is, again, Blazor is an option because web devices, iOS, mobile devices, iOS and Android, modern browsers on mobile devices support WebAssembly. And so Blazor is an option. But that doesn't create a native client app. It's still browser-based, right? So then today, the next thing that you would look at if you're a .NET developer is Xamarin. And Xamarin provides you the ability to create native iOS and native Android apps. And Xamarin Forms is a UI framework that allows you to create your UI definition using XAML once, and it'll run on iOS and run on Android. But I say it that way on purpose because it's you can actually not use Xamarin Forms and create true native iOS and Android, but now you've got to write the UI twice. Right.
2 or 3 times if you're going to do
it.
So Xamarin helps with that combination.
So Xamarin is evolving into something called MAUI with .NET 6. So that's the next generation of Xamarin that is pretty ambitious and nice because there's a fair amount of there's a lot of complexity to doing mobile development because you have to test on various flavors of Android, you have to test on 1 or 2 versions of iOS, you have to test on Windows, test on Mac, assuming you're going to extend out to those platforms. It is just a lot of moving parts. And Xamarin lets you address all of those moving parts, but it doesn't abstract them overly much. Even Xamarin Forms doesn't. MAUI abstracts them a lot more. And so the idea behind MAUI is that you actually create one project and then tell it which platforms you want to target. And the MAUI runtime and the tooling will help you do the things you can do today, but in a hopefully much more productive manner. So
that sounds a lot easier than the way Xamarin works now.
I'm looking forward to it.
I haven't looked at MAUI specifically yet, but now you've got me interested. So
and then the third thing I'll toss out there is a thing, and I mentioned it earlier, called Uno Platform, which is an open source project that sits on top of the same .NET infrastructure that Xamarin does, but they chose to latch on to UWP XAML instead of Xamarin Forms XAML. And the Uno platform folks are moving very fast. This is the advantage, I think, is that they have out of the box support for Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and maybe some other platforms, which with Xamarin, some of those are, well, iOS and Android and Windows are out of the box, but you have to go find other add-ins to do things like Mac or Linux.
Right.
So Uno's in a sense more comprehensive, and has a pretty vibrant community around it. And interestingly, Uno supports WebAssembly. So you can actually write an app using Uno that deploys native to iOS and also can be used through a browser.
Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, no, we're not going to have browser wars anymore. We're going to have platform wars, and which is the better platform, Blazor or Uno or, something else, but I've thought the browser needs to be redone a long time ago. I mean, if you really think of when browsers were created, they were created for one thing, and now they're, morphed into being used for things it was never really intended for. And I can see just the browsers themselves as kind of being an impediment. And I've thought off and on, and how do you get rid of that impediment? Do I just write a Windows, a form that I don't know. I can go down dark holes with that one, but
you're right. It's we walk on a thin edge here because all of us, especially enterprise developers, are vulnerable to Apple, Google, Microsoft, or Mozilla. Just waking up one day and going, we don't like this anymore, and completely devastating everything.
Like Flash,
right?
Like Flash gone. Silverlight gone. All these things that were pretty good back then, and completely gone now.
Yeah. And Apple has been very slow compared to everybody else in terms of supporting WebAssembly, supporting PWA technology, service workers. And it makes sense because all of these capabilities to write really smart client apps that run in the browser, none of them need to store. And so they completely bypass one of Apple's revenue streams. And so Apple, you can understand where Apple's like, we're not sure we really like this new web idea that lets the browser being the runtime is not good if iOS is my premier offering on which I make money.
Yeah, well, Apple, was about 4 years or so ago, I was working for this company here in San Diego, and one of their products was when you go golfing, to keep track of your score and where the holes are and stuff like that, they had these mobile apps for golf courses, right? And it was pretty cool because you could do geofencing. And so, as soon as you walk near a green, it would say, hey, the clubhouse is just over there and you can go get lunch right afterwards, and stuff like that. And you could earn points with it, at the club shop to, turn it in for stuff. But, while I was working there, so, for every golf course in the US to come up with their own app is kind of crazy, right? I mean, they all basically do the exact same thing. It's just hooked up to different, back-end data stores, right? So what the company did, which was smart, is they basically just had, a shell, right? And you go in and configure that shell with your logo and name and things like that, and boom, you have your own app, right? And that's what we charge the golf clubs for. Well, during that time, Apple said, you can't do that anymore, right? They said, you have to create a completely separate application for each golf course, and I'm going, what? That doesn't make any sense, that's, so I don't know how the company, overcame that because I left, but that's just kind of crazy. Why wouldn't you want to use a shell and just sell it as different apps on the iPhone store? I don't know. So before we run out of time, let's talk about music. So you want to discuss modern hard rock and outdoor rock festivals, and hopefully restarting after people get vaccinated. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, fun topic, right?
Yeah.
I tell people that I'm into hard rock and new metal and stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh, Dio and Judas Priest, and all of which are great."
Yeah.
And I do enjoy them, but I like Hailstorm and
Me too.
Nothing More,
Mhm.
Adelita's Way, Godsmack. In fact, that's
Godsmack.
what I'm wearing right now is a Godsmack shirt.
I play a bunch of Disturbed songs every weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, I love Disturbed. Their syncopation in their music is difficult to get used to, but once you do, it's really cool. They're very different from some of the other metal bands out there. Yeah.
So for years now, my brother and I have been going to at least one outdoor rock fest. In fact, there's one in Wisconsin called Rock Fest. And there was one called Rock USA, but they went. The COVID killed them. They didn't survive, and this has been a brutal year, right? And a lot of bands and people don't stop maybe to think about this, but the bands and their road crews, and so I've been consciously making an effort through this year to buy a lot of merch directly, t-shirts, face masks with band logos, that sort of thing. Your hat. But I mean, they need the money because they're not out, and but now it looks like Rockfest, all signs are still go for July. And I'm psyched. I got our tickets. We go there with a camper and stay the whole for 4 or 5 days in our case.
Who's the headliners this year? Do you remember?
Well, Disturbed was a headliner, but they've backed out because of COVID fears. But we still have Korn. There's just a whole slew. One of the other headliners, and I think this is going to be fun, is Snoop Dogg, which what a character. It's going to be. So they usually do two nights that are more modern rock, and then one night that's a throwback. And so
the old school.
Old school. So Snoop Dogg, Limp Bizkit, so those are on the throwback day. But there's just a whole host of modern bands that are because they start basically at noon every day, and then build up until the final headliner in the evening that runs until 1 a.m. typically. So it's three full days of rock. And plus, if you get there ahead of time, there's a bonus day, so which has a lot of local bands and whatnot. So I love it. Yeah,
me too. I've been going through concert withdrawal for I haven't been to a concert in over a year, and some of you out there might know that I actually work for rock bands. When they come into town, they have me do their live show, shots, bands like, Queensryche, and a bunch of other bands I do photography for. And, I know I talk back and forth with, the lead guitarist in Seven Dust, and he actually recorded a video intro thing for my concert. When I do my intros to my conference talks, he recorded a little intro for me. And we swap guitar, things back and forth. And so, I sometimes I went to like 3 shows a week, doing that, and now nothing, and so last year I wrote an article on my music site, saying that I'm not going to a concert this year. And at the very end of the article, I started listing the bands, at least I was tracking and followed, that were doing something to help support their road crew and stuff like that. Like Disturbed put out some T-shirts and some other stuff that 100% of the money went to the road crew for, Disturbed did. And I think I have at least one more band on there that was doing something for the crew.
Shine Down and Nothing More did the same sort of thing. And which I think is admirable because I mean, for one thing, those big bands like Disturbed and Shinedown are businesses. Even the little bands are businesses, but the big ones, have those people are either 1099 or long-term 1099 or employees. So it's and
they don't make much money to begin with.
No,
right? The road
right.
crews don't make a ton of money doing that, and so for them to all be out of a job and not have anywhere to work because everything is shut down when
Yeah.
it comes to sound and lighting and things like that, right? And so yeah, and I don't think any of the the relief packages in America at least addressed this at all,
Not
because
the initial ones. I think maybe the last two have had provisions for non-traditional companies or not, but yeah, it's true. If you're an essentially independent contractor, it's been pretty brutal.
Yeah. And even, this reminds me of kind of, you were talking about buying merch and stuff. And I've been doing the same thing, not only by buying merch from bands, but I've been like attending their live virtual concerts and stuff like that. I'll be doing that, which is great to at least see something, during this year. But, one time when I was talking to John Connolly, who's the lead guitarist from Seven Dust, and you guys should check out Seven Dust. They were nominated for a Grammy a couple of years ago. But I asked him on the phone once. I said, John, so do you have all these streaming services and all this stuff? So where, as a band, do you make most money? Do you make it off of streaming? Do you make it off of CD sales? Stuff like that. And he goes, flat out CDs, right? Because they hardly make anything off of streaming, right? And ever since John told me that, I go, okay, that's it. I'm only buying CDs from now on because that's what supports the bands the best, and that's what I've always done ever since. I think even last week, last year, I saw a tweet by the lead singer of Queensryche, who I know too, and he showed one of his royalty checks from like Spotify or something, and I think it was like for a quarter or something, and he made like $100 and some odd.
Yeah, it's pretty rough, but
yeah.
It's for a lot of us though. I'm not even sure I have a CD player anymore, so I'd buy my CDs and put them in a box, I guess.
Well, that's what I do. I immediately put them into iTunes and I put them in a box. But at least, I know the band's getting more money out of doing CDs, right? And so that's what I do at least. But yeah, I'm so looking forward to getting back into concerts and going to concerts. And I'm getting older. I know how much longer I can do this stuff, and hopefully for a long time. But
I tell you, you go to some of these outdoor festivals, and it's true. Obviously, most of the people are in their 20s and 30s, and there's a fair number of people in their 40s and 50s. But every time that I've gone, there's been people in their 70s too.
Yeah.
So that's I'm not personally planning on letting age slow me down.
No,
I love this too much.
Either, but I'm just trying to see as many concerts as I can before something happens to me or something happens to the band members, because all my favorite bands are getting old too, and so most of my favorite bands,
for what it's worth, Queensryche is going to be at Rockfest, so.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'm pretty psyched. I've seen the new Queensryche post breakup.
I
think 3 times now, and they put on a good show. It's
they're a great band to see, and I've known those guys for a long time, and I do miss Jeff. I have to say that, but I like them too. I like Jeff's band. One of the best shows I've seen in years was in 2018. I did photography for Jeff Tate. At a show up near LA. And, I just, during that show, I just sat there and said, if this was my last show, I would be okay. Because this is
pretty high
awesome.
praise.
Yeah, it was an awesome show. The guy, is our age, and he puts on an awesome show. And he might not sing as high as he used to back in the 80s, but the guy is such a performer, and
2 or 3 years ago, Dee Snider came and was a headliner. Or no, he wasn't the headliner. He was immediately before the headliner on at Rockfest, and he was so great because he was at the time 63 and higher energy and better stage presence than a lot of the younger bands, because he's a master at the stage.
Yes.
And one of the toward the end of his set, he's like, you might have come here thinking I was just the warm-up act, but I'm the real act. He's like, I'm 63 years old, and I'm still rocking as hard as ever. And it was, I don't know. I enjoyed the heck out of his whole performance.
Yeah, Dee Snider was actually like the first music star I really got to sit down and talk to for a long time. So back when Twisted Sister, their first album, right? Twisted Sister was here in San Diego. They were opening for a band called Blackfoot, and so I actually, that's when I won my first guitarist for that tour, right? I won a radio contest, and part of that was winning a guitar, and part of that was getting a guitar lesson with the lead singer, the lead guitarist of Blackfoot, who is the lead guitarist of Leonard Skinner, right? So this show was just like freaking awesome. But one of the most memorable parts of the show itself was, because I won this contest, I was able to go backstage. So it's really the first time I really hung out backstage at a show before. And I met Dee Snider, after his band played. And me and him sat in his dressing room talking like we were best friends for like half an hour. The guy was so nice, down to earth, which I didn't think he would be with all the makeup and hair he did back then. And he was such a nice guy. It stuck with me. And when Blackfoot came to play, this was at a theater here, and so before Blackfoot played, there was some of us in the orchestra pit, watching the show, so we didn't have to go sit with the riffraff, and
hey, that's me. I'm the riffraff here.
so when Blackfoot came to play, they kicked everybody out of the orchestra pit except for me and Dee, right? And what I always remember from that, because we have to go, what I always remember from that is that Dee Snider was acting crazier in the orchestra pit than I was, right? I was doing my bang in the head kind of thing and rocking out and stuff like that. Dee Snider was worse than I was. and he played at the show. So I'd love to hang out with him again. And he's such a nice guy. But anyway, I'm sorry I went down that road. It's a longer story, but fun times at concerts, right?
Yep.
Sorry, everybody. We ran out of time. We're going to have to go. Rocky, I hope to have you on sometime again. And this has been great catching up with you. And maybe next time we'll save more time for the music stuff, because
that sounds great.
You and I could talk.
To it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see you after the show. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
So that's Rocky. I hope you check out CSLA and all the stuff that he's doing. Rocky's a great guy. And like I said, he's one of the few long-haired developers left. So we got to stick together, right, Rocky? Anyway, let's wrap this up so Steve can go to bed. So don't forget, next month, April 20th, 21st, is going to be the Azure Cosmos DB conference. I hope you all check it out. I'll be there watching. I'm not speaking, but I'll be watching. And so I'm really looking forward to that. So go there. It's free. Why not, right? Thanks, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate you all being here this week. Next week, I'm excited to announce I have Alan O'Neill. And if you guys follow CSharpCorner Live, you already know Alan. I don't need to introduce him. He's an awesome guy from Germany. And I can't wait to hang out with him again. I love hanging out with him at conferences and talking to him. He's very down to earth, no nonsense kind of guy, and I really enjoy being around him. So look for that next week. Also, COVID is still not going well. Things are getting a bit better in America, but our cases are increasing because of the spring break shenanigans going on in America. I don't know what's going on in your country, but please be safe. Something you can do for free that will help out your fellow human being in your country is go donate blood. It's free, it's easy, it doesn't really hurt that much, and it makes you feel really good about helping a fellow human. I can't give right now because I got my first COVID shot this week. Yay! I'm really happy. One more shot and I'll feel so much better. But even getting the first shot, I just feel like there's this weight lifted off of me. I haven't changed what I'm doing, but it just feels like finally, after a year, the hope is actually coming that we're going to get back to something besides being locked down all the time. So, so please be safe. Go get your shot as soon as you can so we can get rid of this horrible pandemic. And if you have any questions or comments or guests you would like for me to invite on the show, please email me at rockandcodeworld@csharpcorner.com. And with that, I'll see you next week.